Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer, and today's video is going to be a little bit of a pep talk for objectivists, but more specifically for new objectivists. And by the way, everything I'm gonna say in this video is my personal opinion. I am not necessarily claiming that this is how all objectivists think or experts in Ayn Rand's philosophy think. If you don't know what an objectivist is a person who understand Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism and has decided to apply it in their own life, right? However, just because one decides to become an objectivist, that doesn't mean that being an objectivist is going to be easy right away, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. For instance, one thing that I think all objectivists should understand is that they don't need to be an Ayn Rand character in order to be good. I mean, it's normal for objectivists to want to be as morally perfect and unfazed by society as Howard Roark or Dagny Taggart. But unless you grew up in an objectivist household with objectivist parents who gave you the emotional and psychological tools to become a very objective adult, this is going to be a monumental task for any normal person. So basically, I just want to encourage objectivists everywhere to give themselves a break, because we are all dealing with a lot of baggage and bad habits that we have acquired prior to discovering objectivism that are still informing our decision making, even though we have discovered objectivism. And of course, we have to deal with that baggage and those bad habits that we have acquired prior to objectivism. But it takes time. Don't expect it to happen right away as soon as you decide to become an objectivist. That is not to say that you shouldn't strive to improve yourself and become a better decision maker. But you have to be more understanding of where you actually stand and stop beating yourself up when you don't have the perfect reaction to a situation or a problem. For instance, I think that a lot of objectivists would like to be like Howard Roark, whose self-esteem is so impeccable that he is not affected by what people think of him, If people don't like him, he doesn't care. But the reality is that many people, including objectivists, do care what others think. And the reason for this is because we have grown up conditioned to think this way. Which is why when we see someone suddenly become successful and acquire wealth and start displaying their wealth, we might become envious, even though as objectivists, we have learned that just because someone becomes wealthy, that doesn't make us worse off. Unless, of course, they became wealthy by tricking us into some sort of pyramid scheme. Feeling envy when you shouldn't feel envy does not make you a bad, broken person. It just means that you're not quite there on your journey of building self-esteem for yourself and understanding that you have to focus on obtaining your values, not the values that other people have. So controlling emotions, it's a big thing that we as objectivists have to learn how to do, especially as new objectivists. And I'm just here to tell you, to be kind to yourself. If you're having a hard time doing it, you're gonna get there. Just keep working on it. Now, selfishness. Another thing a lot of objectivists struggle with is selfishness. You might understand the concept of selfishness and rational self-interest, but applying it in your life is going to be a whole another level if you're still dealing with bad habits that you picked up along the way prior to discovering objectivism, and those bad habits are still influencing you despite your best efforts. And it's also going to be hard to be rationally selfish if your psychology was neglected while growing up. You're gonna have to do some work on your psychological health before you can make rational decisions, even if you have embraced objectivism. For instance, I discovered objectivism in 2009, and even a few years later, after I had studied the philosophy and read a lot of Ayn Rand's nonfiction, and I thought I had a good understanding of what rational self-interest was, I was still not making good self-interested choices. For instance, I'm gonna give a relatable example. Even though I had objectivism, I still made the mistake of dating people who were clearly bad to me. I dated a couple people who were waving their red flags in my face, and I still went out with them. Why? Because despite knowing that I had to be rationally self-interested, I didn't actually know how to be rationally self-interested. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to stand up for myself or how to demand respect. And now when I look back, it's easy for me to want to be mad at myself for being so dumb, but I always remind myself to be a little bit more kind and understanding to myself. Because the reality is that it would have been really hard for me to make good decisions back then, even though I had objectivism, because I just didn't have the psychological tools to do it at the time. So just because you understand that you must be self-interested and you understand that you must have self-esteem, simply declaring that you have self-esteem is not enough. Saying that you love yourself won't do you any good if you don't actually love yourself. So you have to, put in the work to actually build self-esteem for yourself. As long as your self-esteem is not where it should be, making rational self-interested choices is going to prove to be a challenge. Another thing new objectivists struggle with, and I'm speaking from personal experience, is being rational. As we know, objectivism encourages you to use reason to deal with life and everyday problems. But if prior to discovering objectivism, you relied on mysticism or you tended to act on emotions only, well, then of course it's going to take a great effort to make the leap into being rational all the time. And what can happen sometimes is that you know that you have to be rational, but since you don't actually know how to be rational, you end up rationalizing bad decisions. For instance, let's say a coworker is rude to you and you're really annoyed, so you want to get back at them and you start rationalizing your thoughts of revenge, right? So you're like, oh, I'm going to get back at them. I'm going to put a laxative in their coffee, and then it's gonna be so funny that I'm gonna feel good. And if I feel good, then that's self-interested, right? But obviously that is not the rational way to go about it. In this case, you have more rational avenues that you can take, like talking to the person directly, or taking your case to HR, depending on the magnitude of the offense. It's okay to seek justice if an injustice was committed against you, but it's not okay to engage in potentially dangerous or unlawful behavior, because that would not be in your self-interest. But to arrive to the right decisions takes thinking and effort, especially when you're used to dealing with problems in negative ways. And why did I use the revenge example, you may ask? Because I am the queen of thinking of complicated revenge plots when someone annoys me. But of course, I don't act on it. I have to remind myself, don't do it. It's not in your rational self-interest. And lastly, let's talk about productiveness. Productiveness is one of the most important things in the objectivist philosophy, because to be happy, you have to be productive. To attain the values that make you happy, you have to work to get them and to sustain them. But what if prior to discovering objectivism, your work ethic was really bad? Well, of course, it's going to take a lot of time and effort to become the type of person that actually enjoys working. So don't beat yourself up just because you're not at the level of a Dagny Taggart who works 24/7 and is a super achiever. I think we should all strive to be as productive as we can to achieve the type of life we want, but there's no need to push oneself to work 24/7 like a Steve Jobs unless you want to build an empire like Steve Jobs did. If all you need to be happy is to have a nice place to live and, to be able to afford some nice trips here and there, work the amount necessary to achieve that type of lifestyle. If you don't need to have all the things that Bill Gates has in order for you to be happy, then don't work as much as Bill Gates worked, because, you don't need those things to be happy. But of course, if that's what you want out of life, if that's what's going to make you happy, to have a lot of things and to build a great empire, then work as much as Bill Gates worked. That type of person does not spend a lot of time scrolling endlessly through YouTube or binge watching series on Netflix. You know, they have to work all the time. So if you want that lifestyle, be prepared to work a lot. So what to do about it? What to do about your desire to be a good objectivist but having a hard time doing it? Well, first of all, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to recognize where you are lacking and try to improve. But at the same time, there's no need to beat yourself up if you don't see immediate results. The reality is that you might have a lot of pre-objectivism baggage that you have to deal with first. Come to terms with what you can control versus what you can't. But also have the intellectual honesty of knowing when you're not doing as much as you could. And just because I am encouraging you to cut yourself some slack does not mean you should give yourself a free pass and not put in the effort. And it also doesn't mean that you should expect other people to give you a free pass when you mess up, because at the end of the day, you still have to take responsibility for your actions. Anyways, that was it for this video. If you found any of the information I shared with you today useful, please give this video a like. And other than that, there will be a new video very soon. So stay tuned and thank you for watching.